And so now, guys, let's get to what we've been alluding to, because on Tuesday morning, the New York Jets fired Robert Saleh after 3+ seasons with the team. Ironically, and Kaz, forgive us as Kaz drops off for a second. We'll be rejoin with him in a moment. But Jaevon, maybe Jaevon, he knew that we were about to hype up the Niners a little bit, because the Jets go from former 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh to former 49ers linebacker Jeff Ulbrich as the interim head coach. And I'll give my thoughts on this in a moment. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. I had some thoughts that I was going to share, but I want to hear what you guys got to say first, and then I'll put a bow on it at the end. But this was shocking to me. Yeah, the Jets are struggling, but was Robert Saleh the problem? Because the Jets have had arguably one of the best defenses in the NFL this year, and for a couple of years. It's just they didn't have the offense to get it done. Whether or not you think they're a top 5 defense in the NFL, they are a top 10 defense. Or yeah, they're not. Maybe they're not top 5, but they definitely are top 10. And so for Robert Saleh to kind of be the scapegoat didn't make sense to me. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this first, because you might end up reading my mind of exactly what I'm going to say. But Jaevon, I'm going to toss it to you first on this one. Just what was your reaction when the Jets fired Robert Saleh last week?
Definitely shocking. I get that, the first 5 games of the season didn't really go right for them. I think the Jets are now 2-4 currently. I think they were 2-3. So they were 2-3 after they lost in London to the Vikings, which kind of came down to the wire. And then this game also pretty much comes down to the wire. And, the Jets are, I believe they are a top 10 defense currently. And Robert Saleh is known for being a defensive mind. The offense, on the other hand, has definitely struggled throughout the past, now 6 weeks of the regular season. And you get rid of the guy who's it's not his fault that he's the head coach. I understand that, but he is more focused on the defensive side of the football, and his side of the ball was up to par. Absolutely. The offense, on the other hand, was not, and they were, struggling with the snap, the cadence, and there's all this going on, and Rodgers is throwing picks. I think he threw 3 picks last week. The play calling on the offensive side of the ball was not up to par. And, somebody had to go, and I guess that somebody was the head man. I thought it probably should have been Nathaniel Hackett that should have been fired. I think tonight we saw from Todd Downing some spark on the offensive side of the football. I thought the offense looked pretty like they were getting their guys involved. Like Garrett Wilson was lining up at multiple sides of the ball. He would line up in the slot on the outside. They're trying to get the ball every which way. Breece Hall was getting involved. You've seen him, lining up, getting a lot more touches. And I just thought that there's a little bit more creativity with the play calling on the offensive side of the ball. Aaron Rodgers, like Shaun mentioned earlier in the show, he threw for almost 300 yards, 296 to be exact. And he hasn't done that in over 1,000 days. So I think we'll see a little bit. This will maybe jumpstart the team a little bit more as we see them next week. I don't know who they play on Sunday, to be exact. But I thought we saw some promise. There were a lot of miscues with penalties and missed field goals that may have prevented the Jets from winning this game. But I do think the Jets are kind of going to go in a this is a good step for them. I don't know if Ulbrich is going to be the guy moving forward in the long term, but for right now, I guess he'll do. I guess we could rule Bill Belichick out of the conversation, because I saw him on the Manning cast. He was talking shit about the Jets, saying, "Yeah, the owner is ready, shoot, fire." So,
Kaz, what did you think about the Robert Saleh news? Because just to touch on Bill Belichick real quick, like we remember Bill Belichick way back when, before Jaevon and I were born. Kaz, I don't know how many years you got on us, but even then you were a kid. But even then you were a kid at that point when Bill Belichick was briefly the Jets head coach before he became the Patriots head coach. And so anyways, just What was your reaction to the Robert Saleh news? And I apologize for framing it from the 49ers angle that we did, but with two 49ers fans on here, we got to do that. But anyways, what'd you think about the Jets fired Robert Saleh 5 weeks into the year?
Yeah, it was definitely premature. I mean, if you look at it from the surface level, it's like, okay, they already had a great defense for multiple years. We've known that. They got, like Sauce Gardner. They went ahead and got that guy. They got the Williams brothers. Like, for you guys to go get Aaron Rodgers, he plays 3 seconds last season, tears his stuff. You go back to the old Jets, that has never had a really good offense ever. And now we're 5 games into the season. You fire head coach because Aaron Rodgers, and like I told you guys before, he has not passed the eye test for me until the last 2 weeks. So when I look at the Jets, I don't look at it and go, "Oh my God, this is a head coach problem." I go, "Dude, this team needs a kind of." I'm seeing Aaron Rodgers not connect with Garrett Wilson a couple. I mean, that's huge, man. Like it's just such a big deal. Like you can't win games if you don't get your number one involved. I mean, you guys are seeing it with Ayuk and Debo. Like when you guys lost Debo for a game or two, I think it was, and Ayuk got all the money and he's not performing. I mean, your guys' record shows, right? Obviously, no CMC, but you don't need to have all of your guys healthy for you guys to have an opportunity to win games because you have a great defense and you still have weapons everywhere. But if they're not producing, you're not winning games. So the Jets aren't producing when it comes to Garrett Wilson, and they're not winning games. I didn't look at that as a Robert Saleh issue at all. And as someone who's watched every Jets game so far, no, there's been a reason why I've been very critical on Aaron Rodgers. I'm like, dude, you're missing wide open guys. I go, you're not going to sit there and tell me Garrett Wilson isn't open. He's open. All right. And if he's not open every play, he's open about 65, 70% of the time. So therefore, if you're that guy who can get him you're this highly, praised quarterback, which rightfully so, we get it. He's a Hall of Famer, first ballot, Super Bowl champion. Cool. You're 40 years old. You have an Achilles injury. Your arm's fine. Okay. On top of that, you're no longer reliant on your legs to extend plays. So we got to kind of step back and stop giving Aaron Rodgers excuses, and that's what I did early on this season. But fast forward 5 weeks, you get rid of Robert Saleh for what? You guys show up, and Toddy said it best. The offense, it did look like they got a little more creative. I did like that. I'm not sure if that was a solid thing or if it was just it just clicked. It's not like the Bills have this crazy defense that's impregnable. You know what I mean? The Bills have lost games against really good opponents. They've been handled by really good opponents, and they've beaten really bad opponents. They're kind of like the Cowboys. I don't really think that the Jets, in comparison to like what the Bills had to offer tonight, in their offense, that's because Saleh was gone. So 110%, it was premature. I would have gave it to at least week 8. You start off. I'm not sure when their bye week is, but say you start off like 3-5. Maybe you're 2-6 or something like that. Then yes, of course, do what you got to do. But I mean, you're not. They were contenders when it came to that division, and firing Saleh might come back to haunt them. We don't know yet, but we saw how they performed tonight. They still put up just 20 points. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like Saleh being gone, all of a sudden this team turned around 110%. You know what I mean? So premature, very premature. I don't think he's a bad coach. The defense obviously rallied behind him. From what I've heard and what I've read, it seemed like he was a player coach. You got to take these articles with a grain of salt. They're going to say nice things about guys, and apparently he was very, very personable, I guess. I think someone mentioned either Garrett Wilson or I think it was Sauce Gardner had a really good relationship with them, would reach out to them annually, last 2 years or whatever, and I guess really enjoyed him and gave him a lot of praise. So you hear stuff like that, and then a guy gets fired. It's like, come on, because let me tell you something. In Philadelphia, if that happens, that ain't happening with Sirianni. Okay, you're not going to hear about, we really love this guy. The things that are being said about an actual legitimate bad coach who's winning somehow, some way. You can see the difference. I don't think that Robert Saleh is a bad coach at all. I don't think he's a great coach, but we don't really know. But I can tell you what, like I said, that defense has been real for a few years and it's been under his watch. So very premature, very premature. And the Jets still might have an opportunity to win this division if they can go on a streak. But as for right now, didn't see anything tonight that told me Robert Saleh was the reason why they couldn't do what they did tonight. So
I completely agree that it was premature, and
Let's play the
there are so
Steelers on
many.
Sunday Night Football. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. That's their next game.
Who they got?
So they got the Steelers on Sunday Night Football in
You gotta
Pittsburgh.
win. You gotta win.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And the Jets are not getting out of the spotlight, and so the entire nation is either going to watch their downfall or they're going to watch their comeback. But when it comes to this Saleh move, it does not make sense to me from multiple angles because you think about it just from the grand picture. It's like, okay, you finally got a quarterback for this guy who has an elite defense. The offense was the problem. You finally get a quarterback, as Kaz mentioned, 4 plays, basically 3 seconds into last season, that quarterback is no longer around. So they just had to punt on last season. They run it back this year. And you give him 5 games to get it done. And then they nearly knock off an undefeated team across the pond. They come back and they nearly beat the Vikings. And that was the game. Like, I get the slow start wasn't what they wanted. International games are weird. And so, like, it just doesn't make sense to me from the Jets' perspective because it's like they didn't even give him like a real shot at it with Aaron Rodgers. And what the biggest thing that doesn't make sense to me, and I just think Aaron Rodgers is lying directly to America, directly to the Pat McAfee audience, because last week Aaron Rodgers didn't have his regular appearance on Tuesday. Why? Because he wasn't going to go on hours after Robert Saleh just got fired. So he appeared on Wednesday. In one of his quotes, he said, "I resent any of those accusations because they're patently false. It's interesting the amount of power people think I have, which I don't." And it just doesn't make sense to me because he doubled down on it. And that's following the news that insiders were saying that Woody Johnson, the Jets owner, called Robert Saleh, or excuse me, he called Aaron Rodgers on Monday night just to say, "Hey, how you doing?" Whatever. It was definitely talking about Robert Saleh. Leading into that, there was the, "Oh my God, Robert Saleh tried to hug Aaron Rodgers after a play, and Rodgers kind of gave him the stiff arm. What's going on?" New York media blew it out of proportion because that's what they do. But for Aaron Rodgers to double down and say, "No, I had nothing to do with this. It's hilarious how much power people think I have." Meanwhile, Woody Johnson, the Jets owner, went on record saying, "I made the move because we have a Super Bowl team this year. We are in a win now situation." And so, with all due respect to Jeff Ulbrich, 49ers linebacker of the past, he's the solution? Like, if you're bringing in Mike Vrabel from Cleveland, okay, that's better. But for Jeff Ulbrich to take over as the head coach, this was completely this was completely an Aaron Rodgers decision because there was another report from Pro Football Talk on NBC Sports. Before he was fired on Tuesday, Jets coach Robert Saleh held, Mike Florio. So Jets coach Robert Saleh held a staff meeting during which he informed the team's coaches that Todd Downing would take over play calling duties for Nathaniel Hackett. Who is Nathaniel Hackett?
That was before he got fired?
That was before he got fired. On Tuesday morning, before Woody Johnson said, "You're done." And so they probably were already thinking about it. Then for Robert Saleh to say, "Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers' best friend, please take a step back. And you're no longer going to call the plays." And I mean, Aaron Rodgers, man, like, I've always been a fan of his because he grew up like an hour north of Toddy and I in Sacramento, went to Butte Community College before he went on to Cal, grew up a 49ers fan, should have picked him instead of Alex Smith. Nevertheless, I've always been a fan of Aaron Rodgers, but this situation, not even all the COVID vaccine, whatever, have whatever take you want on that. That didn't make me change my opinion of Aaron Rodgers. This is making me change my opinion of Aaron Rodgers because it's like you had a good coach in Robert Saleh. Like it was either Kaz or Jaevon. One of you said this earlier. Saleh was a good coach, wasn't great. Still had a lot to prove. And so thank you, Jaevon, Kaz, you said that. And so it just didn't make sense to me from numerous angles of like, okay, if you're going to let him go, Jeff Ulbrich is his replacement. And if they win tonight against the Bills, I guess you could say it worked in a 1-week sample size, but they didn't. The field goal kicker could not knock things down. That's Greg the Leg Zerline. And so I'm just so confused and dumbfounded by it. But hey, Jaevon, for us as 49ers fans, it works out to our advantage because guess who's going to be our new defensive coordinator starting in 2025? Robert Saleh is going to come back to the Bay. So welcome home, Bob. But yeah, just didn't make sense to me. If the Jets don't make the playoffs this year, then it was a total failure. I don't understand this. Like I'm almost lost for words, which doesn't happen much, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Like when it happened, it was kind of like, oh, okay, so they actually decided to do it. But then for Aaron Rodgers to double down and say I had nothing to do with it, that's cap. We
Do the
don't
Jets
have facts.
win if Robert Saleh is the head coach tonight?
I don't know. Kaz, what do you think? Do you think that the Jets win tonight if Robert Saleh was coaching?
That's a good question.
I'll say yes.
Man, I don't know because I think that they cleaned up the penalty issue. I mean, a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to coaching. You have a well-disciplined team. Penalties are mitigated. I think that it was a sloppy game, like we know it was a sloppy game on both ends. I'm not really sure how penalized the Jets are on the season. Like, are they like a heavily penalized team or not? I don't want to give out any false information on that, but I think that he finds a way to secure this game. But again, there was opportunities that were just bonehead mistakes. Some of them were penalties, and some of them were, again, drop passes. I mean, even the interception that Aaron Rodgers threw, I mean, that was a phenomenal interception. Like, it wasn't like a bonehead, Dak Prescott type, whatever. Here you go, Yeah, I'm definitely throwing shade because holy shit. But
You have to.
It wasn't like that. It was like that dude played that ball very well, jumped right over Mike Williams, and the ball was a foot from the ground. It was a great interception. So there was just so many small little opportunities for the Jets to steal that game. I think a little bit of coaching, maybe like at halftime, talking about the penalties, cleaning them up a little bit, whatever, might have done it. But it's one of those things where I can't really say confidently. I would like to think that he can win that game, but I mean, again, 20-23, it wasn't like an impressive, just offensive, just dominant game from either team. You know what I mean? It's like what more does the defense need to do? I mean, do you need to hold them down to 13 points to 16? I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. I can't answer that confidently. I can't.
Well, I'm going to side with Jaevon, and I'm going to say that, yes, they do win tonight. And the sole reason that I'm basing that off of is earlier we were kind of joking about Javon Kinlaw and all the penalties that he was racking up on that last drive. But, let's not forget that Javon Kinlaw was drafted in the first round by the 49ers in 2020 to replace DeForest Buckner. And that was in Robert Saleh's last year as the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. And correct, Jaevon, it was 2020 was his last year, right? Or was it 2019? I might be wrong on this. But
2019 season. 2020.
Okay, yeah. So I stand corrected that Saleh was already gone from the 49ers organization at that point. But my overall point that I was getting to is that the connection that Kinlaw had being a part of the 49ers organization, understanding the discipline and what it takes to be a San Francisco 49er, and then to go to the Jets, I just feel like Robert Saleh had a better prior connection with Javon Kinlaw than a guy like Jeff Ulbrich might. And Jeff Ulbrich is another defensive guy. And so I could be wrong. I mean, they showed Ulbrich talking to Kinlaw at the end of the game. But it's like, even Javon Kinlaw aside, I feel like that was a game that the Jets would have got. Monday Night Football at home, division rival within the state of New York. It seems like, or at least this is all the hypothetical game, but you're right, Kaz, that it was a really good question by Jaevon. And it's the difference between being 2-4 and 3-3 and tied for the lead in your division. Now they're 2 games back, and maybe the Jets coast to the division crown. Maybe they don't. We'll see. And we will continue to talk about it here on Stats Over Politics.